There's a field in Texas, flat land, mesquite trees, the kind of horizon that goes on till it doesn't. If you drive south from Dallas on I-35, past Waxahachie, past the Victorian courthouse and the farm roads, you'll eventually pass a stretch of land that looks like any other. But underneath your tires, about 200 feet below the surface, there are 14 miles of abandoned tunnel, concrete-lined, pitch black, and completely flooded with groundwater. They've been down there since 1993. Nobody's going back in. This is the story of the Superconducting Super Collider, the biggest scientific structure America ever tried to build. A machine that would have been 3 times larger than the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. A project that was going to make the United States the undisputed center of particle physics for the next century. And a decision made in a single congressional vote on a Tuesday afternoon that ended all of it, permanently. By the mid-1980s, America was winning. The Cold War was still cold, and scientific prestige was one of the weapons. The United States had built Fermilab outside Chicago, a particle accelerator that had led to discoveries changing how physicists understood the very structure of matter. But Europe was catching up. CERN, the physics laboratory straddling the French-Swiss border, was building something bigger. American physicists could see what was coming. If nothing changed, the frontier of high-energy physics was going to move east, across the Atlantic. So in 1983, a committee of physicists, the High Energy Physics Advisory Panel, recommended that the United States respond with something unprecedented. A particle accelerator so large, so powerful, that it would make everything built before it looked like a prototype. The machine would collide protons at energies of 40 tera-electron volts, 20 times more powerful than any existing accelerator on Earth. At that energy, scientists expected to find the Higgs boson, the particle long predicted by the Standard Model of Physics, the particle that, in theory, gives mass to everything in the universe, the particle that would eventually be nicknamed, somewhat dramatically, the God particle. The project was called the Superconducting Super Collider, and from the beginning, everything about it was extraordinary. The selection process for the site alone took years and spanned 43 states, geological surveys, seismic studies, proximity to airports, proximity to universities. In the end, 25 sites competed for the final selection. And in November 1988, with a ceremony and a press conference, and a genuine sense of historic occasion, the Department of Energy announced the winner, Ellis County, Texas, just outside Waxahachie, a small city of about 15,000 people built around a granite courthouse and a legacy in cotton. The reason was geology. Beneath Waxahachie lies a layer of Austin chalk, a dense, stable limestone that engineers described as nearly ideal for boring long tunnels. The site sat just 30 miles from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, with access to 2 major international airports and a major university system. And it had something else, space. The Super Collider's main ring was planned at a circumference of 87 kilometers, 54 miles. An oval so large it would have wrapped around most of the Dallas County limits. For Waxahachie, this was everything. City council members who had worked for years to attract industry spoke of a project that would bring 8,000 permanent jobs and billions in economic activity. Local families started envisioning what that meant. Restaurants, hotels, housing developments, a hospital expansion. Schools began updating curricula to attract the children of physicists. Edwin Farrar, who was on Waxahachie's city council at the time, would later describe the moment simply, "It really was a dream project." Construction began in 1991. Tunnel boring machines, custom engineered for the Austin Chalk, began carving the first miles of the ring. Thousands of workers arrived. Engineers from across the country, physicists from top universities setting up offices in commercial spaces. Joe Bohr, one of the world's leading tunneling experts, was brought in to oversee construction of the above-ground buildings and the tunnel itself. He later recalled the period with a word used consistently by everyone who was there: momentum. And the science was extraordinary. The Super Collider wasn't just bigger than anything that existed. It was designed to see things nothing else could. At the energies the SSC would reach, the Higgs boson wasn't a theoretical maybe. It was, physicists believed, essentially guaranteed to appear. The project would also probe territory beyond the standard model entirely. Potential evidence of supersymmetry, early glimpses of what might lie at the deepest level of physical reality. Roy Schwitters, a physicist from the University of Texas at Austin, appointed as the SSC's laboratory director, described the machine as the instrument that would write the next chapter of physics. Nobody disagreed. The original price tag was $4.4 billion. Congress approved it. President Reagan signed off. President George H.W. Bush continued the funding. And by the time the project was moving, really moving, with 14 miles of tunnel bored and billions committed, the projected cost had climbed. First to $8 billion, then to estimates approaching $11 billion. The Department of Energy was struggling with management. International partners who had been expected to contribute $2.6 billion had not delivered. Japan, the largest expected contributor, committed nothing. The project that was supposed to symbolize American scientific leadership was looking, to an increasing number of people in Washington, like a liability. Here is where the story becomes something more than a budget dispute. In June 1993, a non-profit watchdog group released a draft audit report from the Department of Energy's own Inspector General. It was damning. Cost overruns, management problems, a mismatch between the academic culture of the physicists running the project and the industrial-scale project management the construction required. Critics in Congress, and there were now many, used the report as ammunition. The argument shifted from "how much does this cost" to "can we even trust the people running it?" There was something else underneath the numbers, too. The Cold War was over. The Soviet Union had collapsed in 1991. The original strategic rationale, scientific prestige as a geopolitical weapon, was suddenly harder to articulate. Some members of Congress asked openly why America needed to be first in particle physics now that there was no adversary to beat. It was a question that revealed something uncomfortable. The project had always depended, at least partly, on fear. Without that fear, the justification was harder. President Bill Clinton, early in his first term, did something unexpected. He went to Congress and asked them to continue funding the SSC. His letter said, explicitly, that abandoning the project at that stage would signal that the United States was compromising its position of leadership in basic science. Clinton was not a natural champion of the collider, but he saw what cancellation would mean. Congress, he argued, needed to finish what it had started. It didn't matter. On October 21st, 1993, the United States House of Representatives voted to cancel the Superconducting Super Collider. The final margin was not particularly close. Workers on the site received official notices that their positions would be terminated after Christmas. Joe Bohr packed up his files, the maps, the progress reports, the newspaper clippings, the construction record, and put them in a bag he would not open for decades. "I kept these old files," he said years later. "I don't know why, but I did. They have wonderful memories of what we did, how we did it, and then the letdown." What the cancellation left behind in Waxahachie was not abstract. Hundreds of families who had relocated, who had bought homes, enrolled their children in schools, built lives around a project they believed would last 30 years, received termination notices weeks before the holidays. A local career fair was held in November 1993 at a convention center in DeSoto, Texas, where 50 companies set up tables to collect resumes from displaced engineers, physicists, and construction workers. Photographs from that event show rows of people in professional dress waiting in lines that stretched out the door. The Taminga family, whose farm sat in the projected path of the tunnel ring, had sold 211 acres and a newly built home to the project under eminent domain, at prices determined by the government, not the market. They cooperated because they believed, as the county did, that this was the future. When the project was canceled, the compensation they'd received could not be undone. The land was gone. Their neighbor's farm was gone. And the tunnels beneath their old property stayed permanently. The above-ground campus, 5 enormous corrugated steel buildings with 30-foot ceilings and overhead cranes rated at 5 to 25 tons, sat empty for years. Ellis County tried repeatedly to sell the property. It changed hands more than once. In 2012, a chemical blending company called Magna Blend purchased the site. They renamed it the Specialty Services Complex. The crane stayed. The buildings were repurposed for storing and blending industrial chemicals. The tunnels were not touched. They remain there today, sealed. Most access shafts have been capped. The tunnel itself, which engineering reports from the early 2000s described as still structurally sound, has filled with groundwater over the decades. 14 miles of concrete-lined tunnel, sitting in darkness 200 feet below the farms and roads and subdivisions of Ellis County, Texas. Unused, unmapped by the company that now owns the surface. According to local historians, many people who drive over that stretch of I-35 every morning on the way to work have no idea what's beneath them. The punchline, if you can call it that, arrived on July 4th, 2012. On American Independence Day, the European Organization for Nuclear Research announced that scientists at the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva had detected a particle consistent with the Higgs boson, the God particle, the thing the Super Collider had been designed to find. Physicists who had worked on the SSC were asked, in the days that followed, how they felt. Most chose careful words. What most of them said in various forms was this: the SSC would have found it first. With 20 times the collision energy of the LHC and a design purpose that was specifically the discovery of the Higgs, records suggest the SSC would have made that announcement not in 2012, but sometime in the early 2000s, a decade earlier, in Texas. Roy Schwitters, the project's director, gave an interview around the 20th anniversary of the cancellation. He had become a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. He chose his words with the precision of a physicist, but the sentiment was not difficult to read. The United States had built something extraordinary. It had walked away from it. And the thing it was built to find had been found by someone else on another continent. With a machine one-third the size, today the field outside Waxahachie looks exactly like what it is. A chemical plant surrounded by Texas scrubland. The Victorian courthouse still stands downtown. The train still runs through. If you know where to look, you can find the remnants of the access shafts, small hills of earth that local engineers describe as probably capped vertical shafts dropping hundreds of feet to the main tunnel below. Nobody knows precisely where all of them are. The company that owns the property has no blueprints from the original construction. The physicists who left took the schematics with them. What remains is a question that doesn't really have a clean answer. Whether the Super Collider should have been built, whether it would have been managed better if it had continued, whether the science it was designed to do would have changed the trajectory of American physics in ways that still reverberate. These are questions historians debate. What is not in debate is what was left behind. 14 miles of tunnel under Texas, still there, still sealed, still waiting, and a small city that bet its future on the largest scientific dream America ever tried to build. If you found this story worth your time, subscribe to the channel. Every week, we investigate the structures, projects, and decisions that shaped American cities and left their mark on the ground. The comments are open. We read them,